Good morning and welcome to this episode of Between the Lines, a Tampa St. Pete Sports Connection production brought to you by Shipyard Sports Network. It is Sunday, May 31st, and we are bringing you live from our Body Armor Coca-Cola studios at USA's #1 ranked sports bar in the nation, Fergs Sports Bar and Grill. My name is Jake, and I'm here with Aiden. We are missing Tristan today as he is in North Carolina on a vacation, but there is still so much to talk about. So let's get right into it. What do you say we talk about first? We talk about these Rays roster moves as this very hot Rays team has been on.
Yeah, this team has been absolutely insane right now, and they're bringing back small ball. They're bringing back small ball to the game of baseball. But as these past few days, we're starting to see what we both said. If we get injuries, that's what's gonna flip our schedule, right back to its butt, and we're gonna have that fall-off season. Like, we had a great season last year, then we lost to Rhonda, and we start losing more games than winning by a lot. So, and injuries are starting to pile up already, missing a lot of starting pitchers. We have to bring up Cam Boozer. We have to bring up Manuel Rodriguez. No, not Manuel Rodriguez, sorry. But, we're having to start bringing up back those AAA people, and we got to stay healthy.
Yeah, something that the Rays have been doing over the last few days with how taxed the bullpen has been is just constantly bring guys up and cut them. We've seen Andrew Wantz get brought up. We've seen John Heasley get brought up. We're now seeing Cam Bouger get brought up in the absence of, I believe, Craig Kimbrell and Andrew Wantz getting cut, with Trevor Martin also coming back up. This bullpen has had a lot of just constant injuries and long games from starters getting pulled early. And it doesn't help when the guy that's been the most in Drew Rasmussen gives up, only 4 innings, 70 pitches, as well as, 5 earned runs, which led to a loss right here in Tropicana Field right behind us. And, something that's just super unfortunate is it ends his streak of 3 or less runs in
4 or less
runs and 48 consecutive starts he had, which is just an outrageous number. You don't see that from pitchers nowadays. Just constantly 4 or less runs as a starter is, there's not even a lot of relievers that can do that. I know Griffin Jacks for a fact gave up 5 runs. Hunter Biggie gave up 5 runs. A lot of these guys give up a lot of runs, and, seeing that from a starting pitcher is amazing, but it's nothing scared to be about for Drew Rasmussen. He's still a stud. Things like that happen. He had a blow-up start. It's whatever.
Yeah, Todd, going back to that game, though, we did have 2 ejections. We had 3 total ejections coming from the game, from standing up for the national anthem and staying out there as long as possible. We lost Manuel Rodriguez and Steven Wilson. Both got ejected from that game for your Tampa Bay Rays. And the Angels lost Brent Suter, all getting ejected for standing up for, not just standing up for it, but staying on the field as long as possible after the national anthem. We've obviously seen that before in past years, but they brought it back, and it did end up coming in ejections.
Yeah, and something it's very, it's honestly a tradition, but when it comes to guys who are already injured, those guys didn't care if they got ejected. I'm sure they'd love to be in the clubhouse for the game, or in the dugout for the game, but it really was not a big deal for them, I bet.
Yeah, that's what we could say about the Rays pitchers. Steven Wilson and Manuel Rodriguez are both on the IR, so it doesn't really matter so much. But Brent Suter is pretty sure he is on the active roster. He pitched earlier against us, and that's just I think that's where it gets to, that's not really smart. You just lost the bullpen piece, and if they needed it that game, which it ended up meaning they didn't, but if you needed him that game and you didn't have him because he got ejected for standing for the national anthem way past its time, it's obviously they have injured people to throw out there. Obviously I love it having fun, but I think the Angels kind of did something a little stupid there.
Yeah, and that's when you got to take it. Kurt Suzuki's got to step up as a manager and take control and tell the guy, listen, if this game goes 14 innings, which is not likely, but it happens, we need you to go out there and pitch. So, come back in, and yeah, just not a very smart decision. Getting on to some other news, though, the Rays play the Angels today at 1:40 at Tropicana Field, somewhere where they have been pretty much dominant from. I believe 20-6 the home record this season. And, looking at this lineup today, it's just so good yet again. It's, The bottom three is pretty scary with Mullins, Fiducia, and Walls, as it will be every day. The catching is something that the Rays need to upgrade. The shortstop is a position that the Rays could look to upgrade, and so is center field. I think if they can go out there and they can get a Byron Buxton level talent, I've heard the Orioles are even maybe available to shopping Adley Rutschman. I think that's possible. Mm-hmm. I think a big splash for this team. I think if you can go out there and get a fourth legitimate, really scary bat to complement Junior Aranda Caminero, you are going to maybe even be World Series favorites because the rest of this lineup just plays such complimentary baseball. If you can get a Byron Buxton in there instead of a Cedric Mullins, there is a great chance that this roster can do very special things going in a deep postseason run.
Yeah, that's what me and you were also talking about yesterday. There's not many teams that have a better starting top three than Yandy Diaz, Aranda, and Junior Caminero. We went through every team, and the more you look into it, even just looking at straight like batting average, RBIs, home runs, which that is not what builds up a player. And we were also looking deeper into that too, like taking in fielding, for example, because obviously Junior Caminero is not one of the best fielders. Not even close.
And Yandy Diaz doesn't even play the field, so
because he was not so good at it. But there's not many people that have a better top starting three this year so far. Like Yandy Diaz these past couple games has been electric. He started the past two games both with a starting home run in the first inning, which is absolutely electric. He has 3 home runs in just the past 2 games by itself, and hopefully adding another one today against the Angels. But,
yeah, and 3 homers in the last 2 games. We got to witness game 1 of the Angels and Rays series Friday night at the Tropicana Field. That was an electric game to go to. It was considered the tarps off game. And I think that's some of the biggest news going on right now in baseball is the tarps off movement. So what do you think about that?
I think it's bringing the fun back to baseball. It's like super fun to go to Rays games. It's super fun, I believe, to go to any games. But it's bringing more fans. I think that's what Ken Babby's doing well right now is bringing fun back to Tampa Bay Rays. I think this is something that wouldn't happen under Stu.
Yeah, this is I think I said it as well. I think if Stu Sternberg was still the owner, I believe, some of these things might have been limited or they might have not promoted it and they wanted people to kind of get away from it because it could cause problems, There could be, just something out of the ordinary can always cause a problem. So I think it's definitely, something to look out for. But I think this new ownership group is embracing it. They're embracing the fact that people want to get in that building. They're embracing the fact that people want to show up to games and cheer on the Rays. And I think that's an amazing thing. I don't think this is something that would happen under the old ownership.
Yeah, but this also makes me wonder, is the tarps off? When do we think the tarps off is going to stop?
It's a great question.
It's been going on for about a week or two now.
I'd say about 2 weeks, but only about a week's worth of games for the Rays.
Yeah, about 2 weeks now, and it hasn't showed signs of dying. It's only showed signs of growing. And obviously we didn't see it much. I'm losing by a lot yesterday. So, I just don't know when. I just wonder, when do you think it's going to die off?
I think this is one of those things, honestly, that kind of goes on and off throughout the whole season. I think, if the Rays are in a close game in the 7th, I think that's when it's going to get started almost every time. But I think, in a game like yesterday, when we're in August baseball, if we're down 14-4, I don't think, you know what I mean? There's, by the 8th inning, if we're down 10 runs, there's only going to be 6 to 10,000 people sitting in that building because of the fact, the team's down so much, beat traffic. So, that's a game where I could see, a very, very little crowd maybe do it. But for me, honestly, it's something that I think is going to go on for a while. I think it really just groups up passionate fans. And I think, if you want to make some friends that watch baseball and go to the game and find some friends, go in the tarps off, you are going to find passionate baseball fans that care about the sport and that want to cheer on the Tampa Bay Rays. So I think it's an amazing movement.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and another thing is I've seen a lot of people say that the Rays or every other team is trying to be like the Cardinals and copying it. And all I have to say to that is this isn't a new thing. This happened at a preseason Buccaneers game I've went to like 2 years ago. This has been happening for years. This is a literal tradition overseas. hopefully it becomes a tradition in baseball because that's something that, a lot of people, it just, passionate fans and making noise and help cheering on your team is something that shouldn't just die off just because, you don't have a shirt on. So, it's a thing that's been going on forever. So this isn't just a Cardinals thing. This is a sports thing.
Yeah, and also it goes back to baseball fans. It's not only Cardinal fans, obviously, but they always wonder, like, why don't you guys like watching baseball, all this, blah, blah, blah. And then we finally get people like, I see so many people, they just want to go to a Rays game, do the tarps off and everything. So many people want to go to these games. And now that they're bringing in they're starting to bring in more fans, more people are starting to watch it. Cardinals fans are starting to say, hey, we started this. This should be our thing. You guys are copying us. And it really contradicts what almost all baseball fans want. And they want people to watch. They want people to share their ideas with. They want people to watch the game of baseball. And it's just doing the opposite. You're trying to make it a competition again. Be like, well, it's cool that you guys are doing it, but we started it. It's like, it's starting to bring up like childish arguments. Like, you do it, but I did it first. All this, it's just, let's have fun as like all get together as baseball fans. Let's all have fun.
Yeah. And it's something that, if I was, going down to Miami to watch a Rays Marlins game and let's say it was a sold out crowd because they had some crazy promotion. We know that wouldn't happen on any other game in a Marlins stadium. It's seriously, I would join in. It's fun. It's exciting to go over there and just scream your head off and, just watch a baseball game. And you know what I mean? The energy, that's something else that a lot of people don't realize is the energy, not only from the tarps off, is loud and it spreads throughout the whole stadium. That was the game on Friday was maybe the loudest I have seen Tropicana Field since a playoff game that I went to in 2023, which also wasn't a sellout. But it didn't get that loud on opening day when there was 8,000 more people there. This tarps off movement has brought the Rays 18,000 fans. It is a weekend series, so maybe not necessarily the best example for it, but this is a team that averages about 14,000 fans, and in a series against the Angels where 2 years ago, 3 years ago in 2023, if the Rays were playing their absolute best, I don't think a series against the Angels was gonna bring in 18,000 fans even on a Friday night. I think we would have got 15K, but this movement is bringing fans together. It's bringing them to want to watch baseball, and it's spreading throughout the whole stadium. And the players are feeling it. You can see Richie Palacios has completely loved the movement. He has openly said it. You can tell late innings, he has been getting clutch hits, and you can tell the energy is going straight to the players.
Yeah, I have to agree. Actually, I'm trying to go back and see how Richie, just his straight up stats right now. He's batting .262, 17 RBIs, and a home run. That's just his playing the top three everyone looks at. But he's not even a daily starter. He's not starting every single day. He's getting out there and
he's more of a utility platoon.
And he's doing it well. Going back to these games, he had 1 for 3, 1 for 4, 0 for 3, but he had 2 for 6. Then you have a 1 for 3, 1 for 4, 1 for 3, 2 for 2, 2 for 5, 2 for 3, and all of that that's just all off the start of the movement. He's just been insane. That whole Orioles series where we started it, that's a combined what is that? 4 for 9. That's great batting average to have right there, just straight up. That's batting .444, and he had an RBI on each of those games, also snagging a bag and scoring himself twice. No, 3 times actually. Sorry. He's playing better with knowing that there's fans behind him, and that's one trait we have to know about Richie Palacios. So
yeah, and that gets you excited for playoff baseball here in Tampa Bay, knowing that there are guys that if the energy is there, they're going to step up. We already know Junior Caminero can do it from the World Baseball Classic. It was the same thing with Randy. We knew he could do it. There's really not many guys on this team that have playoff experience or have played in big moments. You know what I mean? Chandler Simpson has, the biggest game he's played in is probably there really hasn't been a big moment for Chandler Simpson other than maybe an end of the game,
like extra innings game.
Yeah, like this is a good test for the Rays. It's also a good test for them to go out and look at other players because this is pretty much happening in every stadium now. and they can go out there and see which guys are going to rise to the occasion when the energy is there, because that's what's most important. You know what I mean? Obviously, getting there is the first step, but once you get there, you've got to have guys that'll step up and play once the energy is there. And I think Richie Palacios is going to be, maybe a key guy going into the postseason because of the fact that he will rise to the occasion.
I agree, but it's been a while since we've been on here. I say we start talking about some Buccaneers football. Would you agree?
I'd agree. This is a team that I've seen either 100% negativity for or 100% positivity.
Yeah, I've been seeing stuff all over social media where it's like, I think Buccaneers will be third in the South. I think they're going to be second in the South. And I see people I think they're going to be first, and their defense is going to be so much better. They're going to be so much greater. I think they're going to be first in the South. Obviously, people are also saying that's not much of an accomplishment, but I think coming off of a fantastic draft, which I think Buccaneers have been like pretty good drafting team in these past couple of years.
I don't think there's any debating that.
Yeah.
When you take a look at full draft, you go look at the third round, the fourth round, you go look at all these guys that they've gotten, Yaya Diaby, Cody Mauch. There's an endless names, Jalen McMillan. There's an endless amount of names that they've drafted in the first, in the rounds 2 to 4 over the last 4 years that are still on rookie contracts or recently getting extended that have, Like people like to shit on Cade Otton. He was a 5th round pick.
Yeah. He wasn't supposed to come in here and be which obviously I still find him as a solid tight end target. He's going to have a good game when you need him to. If not, he's going to do his job. But going back to this most recent drafts, I don't think we've even had another show since draft.
Yeah, it's been a long time. We've had
first round, your Buccaneers selected Reuben Bain Jr. Obviously, I think that was a steal of the draft. I think a lot of people are saying that. I think he's got a dog mentality. I think there's so many positives about him that that people overlook all of them just because he has short arms. And I think that was a great pick by the Buccaneers. What do you think, Jake?
It's one of those things that you look, I think, we're going to look back at in a few years and be like what was every team ahead of us thinking? You know what I mean? Maybe there's some teams, like obviously the Raiders weren't going to go with him. There was probably a consensus 2 or 3 guys better than him in the draft, but other than, Caleb Downs, maybe Arvell Reese, maybe, and Fernando Mendoza, there really wasn't any guy you could definitively put above Reuben Bain. And so, just because he has short arms, you know who else had short arms? Aaron Donald.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is something that, he doesn't use his arm length to play. He uses his quick speed, his power, and just his overall athleticism to win. He doesn't need, long cuts.
Yeah, but what I want to talk about too is a lot of drafts, other people had us taking Akeem Mesidor from also Miami. But it makes you wonder, if we had taken Akeem Mesidor, let's say we didn't get Reuben Bain, we taken Akeem Mesidor, but now we do get Reuben Bain. Reuben Bain is 21. Akeem Mesidor, I'm pretty sure, is 25. And
Reuben Bain is currently the better player.
Yeah, and just off of that straight up, we just
in college at least.
We just got a player that's not only better, but he's 4 years younger. Like that draft pick is such a great draft pick in my opinion, but I don't know. I think that's a great draft pick right there.
Yeah, and something that a lot of people wouldn't realize is, if you took a look at this Buccaneers roster right now, take Reuben Bain off and look at that edge rusher room, it is not very promising. I think Yaya Diaby is a solid edge rusher 1.
Then again, I'm pretty sure he was the later rounds too.
Yeah, Yaya Diaby? Yeah, he was a 3rd round pick.
Yeah, 3rd round going back to that 2nd to 4th round with the Bucs. Yaya Diaby, 3rd round pick. He's a great edge rusher right now.
Yeah, and I think if you take a look at overall top 32 edge rushers, I think Yaya Diaby will find him somewhere in that mid-20s. And, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but when that's your best edge rusher, you'd hope to have another guy, maybe in the early 30s. And after him, it really gets down to, probably 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they have a few really solid depth pieces. I think David Walker, 4th round pick last year, who tore his ACL, hasn't played before in the NFL. I think he could be a very, very solid edge rusher piece. In terms of depth. I think, Anthony Nelson is one of, if not maybe the best depth edge rusher pieces. I think, he gets 4 to 5 sacks a season when playing against depth. I think that's about as good as it gets. You don't want him as a starter, though.
And then we also signed
Al-Quadain Muhammad.
Yeah, Al-Quadain Muhammad.
Yeah.
He had people don't even notice that he had 11 sacks last
Yeah, he had
season.
11 sacks last year. Do I think he's going to get 11 sacks this year?
No. But
I think he was playing off, the best edge rusher in the world. Aiden Hutchinson, if not top 3. And let me freeze up here.
Oh, there we go.
I think, if you take a look at Ruben Bain, you're getting a guy who could come in and be an immediate impact as he was, projected. If you took a look at any mock draft throughout the NFL season, before the NFL season ended and they started getting all these measurables and, all these, weird tests to try to
him going top 3.
I
saw him going.
There was no mock draft where he fell past 5.
Yeah, and then real draft comes around, so they start doing all these measurements. Oh, he's got 3rd shortest arms ever recorded since it's been recorded, and
you know who's got shorter arms than him?
Who?
Kalijah Kancey.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. Kalijah Kancey is one of the 2 players that have... Actually, I think he's number 2. I think Kalijah Kancey's number 1. And so, that's something else that the Buccaneers look at. And, obviously he hasn't played much, and he hasn't been exactly what we thought he's going to be. But I think,
doesn't mean he's
Kalijah Kancey has been a great player. And I think, him just constantly coming off of injuries, he's not going to be at his best. I think if we can get a full healthy season out of Kalijah Kancey, with people are starting to give up on him for. But all I have to say is if you go and look at Vita Vea's first 3 years in the league, he played, 5 games max a season as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it took him until year 4 to really stay healthy, because this is a process. A lot of guys, it's a really hard thing to adjust and get into the NFL and keep your body right. It takes time. And, if he wasn't ready to do that in year 1, him getting injured is only going to set that back, and then him getting injured is going to set that back more and more. And so, he's got to adjust. And I think this season, if we can get a healthy season out of Kalijah Kancey, this might be the best D-line in football. And that might be a hot take to say, but you look at Vita Vea up the middle, nobody's running up on him. I think Kalijah Kancey is one of the most athletic D tackles, and I think it's an excellent pairing with Vita Vea. You've got Yaya Diaby, who, once again, we're looking for a breakout season out of. I think with him having a competent edge rusher, not named Hassan, I want to say something worse, but Hassan Reddick on the other side of him, I think, he really has the opportunity to thrive. And then you get a guy who was a top 5 talent in the draft, undisputed, in Ruben Bain. And then the amount of depth that they have, they went out and made D-line depth a priority. They have so much D-line depth. I think this is a team that could have the best D-line in football.
I do agree, but that also takes us to a 2nd-round pick, Josiah Trotter Jr. Pretty sure he came out of Mizzou. I think that was also a fantastic pick. I like how he complements Alex Anzalone. Alex Anzalone, obviously being a zone coverage type of linebacker. Isaiah Trotter is really a run stopper. He's going to go up there and blow up the run. I think both of those linebackers complement each other, and I think Josiah Trotter is really a shadow of kind of what Lavonte David was, a good run stopping, but I think Lavonte David also in his earlier years had that zone coverage upside too. But you can't replace Lavonte David with one college player. You just can't. Even with leadership too, you can't replace him with just.
That's what I was gonna say. We talked a little bit about this yesterday too. The leadership thing is the biggest part. The linebacker room for the Buccaneers wasn't good, and I don't think it's entirely on Lavonte David. I think he didn't play his best. And, who expects a 37-year-old linebacker too? But I think the biggest thing that, the Buccaneers are missing right now is that leadership. And I think there is a plenty amount of guys that can step up. We already have Antoine Winfield and Vita Vea as leaders. I think they're, maybe going to take a little bit of a step up now that Lavonte David isn't the lead guy. But you go look at a guy like Tyke Smith who could step up. Jacob Parrish had an excellent rookie season. I think he might step up a little bit as a leader. Alex Anzalone is a great leader for the Lions. Is he going to be a Lavonte David level leader? Absolutely not. But, there's a combination of guys, Yaya Diaby. I think Yaya Diaby and Tyke Smith are both going to take big steps as leaders. And then I think Vita Vea and Antoine Winfield are both also going to try their best and try to fill that void. But I think that's the biggest thing for the Buccaneers right now. I don't think there's a single position that they got worse at.
Yeah, I would agree. But then you go to the third round. So a lot of people said this was the steal of the draft. Also, they were saying it's more of a steal than Reuben Bain, but Ted Hurst coming out of, I'm pretty sure he came out of, it's either Georgia State or Georgia Southern. Pretty sure it's Georgia State.
I believe it is Georgia State.
Georgia State, as he was one of the 1,000-yard receivers last year in college football, and he's just a perfect replacement for Mike Evans. Obviously very unfortunate for the Buccaneers losing Mike Evans. Had such a long, great career with us, but I don't think you could have replaced him with a better wide receiver. Ted Hurst has a very strong upside, great deep ball receiver. He showed up he represented our Buccaneers on media day for the rookies. I think he's fantastic. I think it was a great third-round pick, and I like what we did there.
Absolutely, and I completely agree. I think in terms of value, I think Reuben Bain has the potential to be a Aiden Hutchinson level player. I don't think anybody, before they knew if you took his arm length out of the question, which he obviously didn't even use in college, so I don't know why it's such a big discussion. I think if you take a look at that, Reuben Bain, people would have thought, anybody would have said that they think he has the potential to be a franchise-leading edge rusher, which there's really not any of those guys in the league right now. There's, Micah Parsons, Aiden Hutchinson, Max Crosby. There's, maybe 3 or 4 guys in the entire league that you could count as that. And so I think when you take a look at this team, I think Ted Hurst really is one of the best values in the entire draft, not even just for the Buccaneers. I think he's bringing something to that Bucs receiver room. If you look on paper, the Bucs, their receiver room was good, whether Mike Evans was here or not. Jalen McMillan had an excellent rookie season. Unfortunately, he just missed the first half of last season, but I'm expecting, if you ask me, I think he really might be the most talented Buccaneers receiver right now, which is something that a lot of people wouldn't agree with, but it's something that I believe in. I think he's a phenomenal talent, but he's more of that, Z. He can play the X a little, but he doesn't quite have that size. He's, relatively tall, but a lot of corners are going to be about the same height as him. Emeka Egbuka is a true Z, and Chris Godwin is that true slot receiver. So they didn't have size. They didn't have a real go ball. Maybe Tez Johnson, but, obviously lacks size.
Probably, I think, the smallest NFL player in the NFL right now.
He's the smallest player in NFL history, but his speed makes him a little bit of a go ball receiver. But at the same time, how much can you rely on that when trying to, get size? And, if he's going against a fast corner, which is what they're just going to put him up against every time, you're not going to get any go balls. I think Ted Hurst unlocks an entire new playbook.
I think he unlocks a whole new physicality to the question too. You come up and you see Tez Johnson lined up. I love Tez Johnson. I think he's a great wide receiver. But you see him come up and line up. You're probably going to you can put any of your corners out there, have them press up, see if they can get a good jam off of him, and then you can eliminate a whole wide receiver out of the play. Ted Hurst brings that physicality, brings that size that you can't just send the corner over there, have him press up, jam him. He's a big physical dude. And I think he has a very similar deep play to him that Tez Johnson has. But then I think going to the fourth round now, we had Keontae Scott. We went back to Miami taking corner Keontae Scott. I think he's going to play a similar role that what's his face? Jacob Parrish played last year.
I agree.
I think he's going to play very similar to Jacob Parrish too. I think he's going to do really well against running up and making open field tackles on screens. I think he's going to be great coming off the edge. I know Jacob Parrish I don't know if he had multiple. I know he had a sack last year though. I think, which also we saw like Keontae Scott too. Obviously he has a little bit of coverage issues, but then again, that's what we have Zion McCollum and Jacob Parrish for. And I think what the Bucs needed was, over the past few years, I've seen stats that show Bucs have like the most missed tackles in the league. And since I think we're starting to finally realize that, we're starting to draft people like now Keontae Scott, last year Jacob Parrish, Josiah Trotter, all these new people that are just great tacklers. And I think the Bucs are doing a great job this year at noticing what they have holes in and fixing that.
Yeah, something that I think a lot of people don't realize with Keontae Scott is they're moving Jacob Parrish to an outside corner this year, which is something that a lot of people are a little bit skeptical of. But I think if you take a look at it, Antoine Winfield was a nickel in his first year. I believe Jamel Dean was a nickel in his first year. These guys have different size profiles. Not really much of Antoine Winfield. They're about the same size. Tyke Smith was a nickel his first year. And every single year, people are like, why are they moving him off of this? He just played great. But I think in terms of NFL, defensive backs, I think if you can play your first year in the nickel, it lets you unlock a new level of physicality. It lets you, how do I say this? It really lets you kind of learn football at the NFL level in not necessarily an easier, but it lets you learn it, kind of simpler in a way. It lets you kind of simplify the defense. And then when you move into that outside spot, you've had an entire year of development to become an outside corner or a safety. And with Parrish, I think he is going to thrive in that outside corner. I think, a lot of people look at his size and he's like, I believe he's 5'9", and they're like, they think that he doesn't have the physicality to do it. But I think he is, he's as physical as it gets.
Yeah, I do agree. And I also agree with making it simpler football. Nickel is a dumbed down, easier version of corner, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. But, you're going to have your simple man coverages. You're going to have, usually coming out of the nickel, you're going to have shallow zones, which, in my opinion, as a corner, I think that's easier. I think shallow zones are easier than deep zones. Obviously, deep zones is saying, like, don't get beat deep. But usually if you're nickel and you're covering, like, inside on man, like just in a simple man coverage, that's easier. That's where you're going to see most of your shallow routes. That's where you're going to see most of your straight downs. I think it's the easier form of football. I think it gets them used to NFL crowds, like gets you used to all that stuff. And that's what I think is great to put. I think it'd be a great spot for him. Also, you're going to see him coming off the edge blitzing a lot too, which I think is what Keontae Scott did great in at Miami. And I don't know. What do you think about that, Jace?
I think, the one concern I do have is Jacob Parrish was such a downhill player. I don't think his coverage skills, lacked at all. I don't think they were perfect, but, he was a really good downhill tackler. He was really good at playing the shallow zones, and I think that's something that nickel does thrive at, and that's something that Keontae Scott does thrive with. And so I think moving Parrish to the outside, I think maybe could have a little bit of a struggle with the deep balls, but overall, I think Keontae Scott is an excellent fit at nickel. He obviously played it in college and was graded as the best nickel in the class. And it's another one of those picks for the Bucs. It was 4 straight where people were like, they got great value. They got maybe one of the best guys at the position. Obviously, Ted Hurst, people didn't think was, but a lot of people believed with Ted Hurst that if he was a, let's say an Ohio State receiver, they thought he would have been, the number 2 guy there.
Up there with Carnell Tate.
Yeah.
He went to Ohio State.
Yeah, he would have been a first-round pick. I saw a lot of people saying that they don't think he would have made it past pick 20 if he played for a big college, and obviously that's something that a lot of people look at. But also, time and time again, the Bucs have proved that, with positions like that, your route tree, your talent, and how physical you are is going to play at every level. And so if you can test that and make sure he's not just outrunning slower guys because he's playing against slower competition. He's still as fast as any other receiver. He's still as fast as any other, or still as physical as any other receiver. And look at his pro day. Look at his pro day. He was absolutely amazing. There was no, he didn't get beat up by the better talent. He played the exact same. And so I think he is going to thrive at the NFL level. And I think that's the exact same with Keontae Scott.
Yeah, and then we go on to our last 3 picks. It was, following up was DeMonte Capehart, Billy Scroth, and Bauer. What do you think about them?
I honestly would have liked to double up on guard and not go with a tight end there. I think, in my opinion, I think the tight end depth right now is amazing. I think Devin Colpin, Payne Durham have, really allowed the Bucs to run some better blocking formations. I think it allows for them to play, better brand of football. But to me, Bauer Sharp is the exact same guy as O'Keefe. I think he's a blocking tight end at heart. I think he's a special teams guy. And you're getting O'Keefe back. I just don't see a reason to go make a move on a tight end unless it's going to be a legitimate threat with K. Dotton.
I agree. But, yeah, I think I very enjoy those picks, though. I mean, obviously the Bauer being Bauer Sharp being a little iffy, but I think Billy Scross was good to add the offensive line depth. And then you get DeMonte Capehart, big defensive lineman. Obviously they've shown that we're going to do that a lot. We have obviously Vita Vea, we have Elijah Roberts getting in
Raheem
there.
Nunez Noches.
Yeah, we're bringing in depth for that inside, and to add to Vita Vea's run stopping ability. I think he's one of the, if not the best run stopping defensive tackle in the NFL, and I think that's why I also like the Reuben Bain again. It's going to force them to run to the outside. I think Reuben Bain is going to rack up a lot of TFLs this year. I think it's going to give him a lot of development.
I agree, and kind of wrapping up the draft there, I want to get into kind of this Bucs roster as a whole, as we've kind of touched on. I think if you go position by position, you've got Baker Mayfield, who they believe is the franchise quarterback. He had a little bit of a down year last year, but I don't think the Bucs are concerned with him at all. I think it was the shoulder injury yet again, which we saw with the Browns.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why he was as inaccurate as he was. We thought in watching the games, if you were to sit there and watch a Bucs game and you notice that, Baker's stat line looks good. I wonder why they're losing games. And then you look, you notice he's not if you sit there and watch the games, he's not connecting on usual passes that we see him make. It's easy. It'll be simpler passes. We see him overthrowing them, underthrowing them. The deep ball was not here this year. Obviously, I think it's still one of my favorite plays from last year was the Bucky Irving deep ball. I think that's one of the greatest deep balls I've seen in a while. Or I think of last year, that was a fantastic deep ball. Perfectly hit him in stride, but that's the only one. Like Mecca Agbuka had the one-hand one, obviously saving Baker a little bit there. You had I don't know. His accuracy was not up to par, and I think that was the only concern. But I think that did root from that shoulder injury, and I think he's going to bounce back a lot this year. I think he's going to have a similar season. So I think what Baker needs to do is obviously when he had all those touchdowns, I think it was 41 touchdown year, he threw like 15 interceptions. I think if he can combine the less interceptions and keep that touchdown ratio, because we know we've seen him do both. It's not like I'm trying to say, Jameis Winston would have been great if he didn't throw interceptions. So that's obvious.
I think the big thing with that is, I think if you take a look at Baker Mayfield's, big interception season and his best season, of his career, where he had 41, I believe as well, touchdowns, they really all came in bunches. It wasn't like he was kind of throwing one a game. I think, there was a stretch of 3 games where he threw probably 8 interceptions. And I think there was another one later in the season. I think obviously you can say this with a lot of guys, but I think if you took off 4 or 5 games from Baker, he had probably 2 interceptions, which is a lot when you're talking about almost 1 per game in a 17-game season.
And usually, even when he did throw those interceptions, they weren't like game-changing interceptions. He had 3 interceptions against the Saints, which we put 40 points up against that one year.
I think it was more than 42. I think it was a 50.
We put 50-point game
it was
up
a
against
50.
the Saints, beat them by over 2 times their score, and
Baker threw 3 picks that game.
Yeah, he threw 3 picks that game.
And one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is the depth on this Buccaneers team last year was the biggest issue. I think, if you take a look at the best starter at every position, I think the Buccaneers could have gone toe-to-toe with any other team.
Yeah, I think it's been a problem for them for a while. That one year having to bring in Josh Hayes, having to bring in who else did we bring in? We brought in a bunch of names that you have never heard of.
Tyreek Funderburg
is who else. They were starting corners for the Bucs that year.
Yeah.
Just because it shows that you need depth. You just need depth.
Yeah, and
depth
I think
it's very important. It's very important. Obviously, it sucks to have such a good guy sitting so low in the depth chart, but then again, it's needed for injuries. If all these superstar rosters, usually they have great depth. You can take this dude out. You can take out the first team, put the second team. They're going to put up similar stuff, and that's what you want to see. You want to know that your second string is ready and it's football ready to go. And that's just not what the Bucs have.
Yeah, and kind of backpacking off of that, I think going position by position. We'll start with quarterback. If you take a look at the depth last year, Teddy Bridgewater came in that Rams game, which we watched at Fergs. It was horrible.
That was embarrassing.
I don't think Teddy Bridgewater knew he was still playing on an NFL roster. He didn't look like he has played in a good few years, which he hasn't. But it looks like he also hasn't practiced in a few years.
Like he hasn't played football as well. It's watching that he was tripping over his own feet. He looked immobile as anyone. Like I think I saw more mobility out of Tom Brady some years. And it's like that can't be a backup quarterback. Obviously, knowing it, Baker had that shoulder injury. It's not even like they just kept picking up these young guys, seeing if they were boom or bust. But it wasn't. You need a backup quarterback, which is why
and I think Jake Browning.
I think they noticed that, and I think that's why they picked up Jake Browning. I think
that's a phenomenal pickup.
I think he was, if not the best backup quarterback last year. And
I agree.
He showed that.
And I think a lot of people would have maybe called this bias, but I think if you asked me last year, I would have, if I did a backup quarterback ranking, I think Marcus Mariota probably goes in that number 1 spot. I think he steps in and is a legitimate starter on a good amount of teams.
Obviously, he couldn't get the Bengals, but he kept the Bengals in that season.
Yeah.
Although they were losing some games,
he has upside. I think that's the end of it.
Yeah, he's gonna throw you a bad game. He's a backup quarterback. He's not supposed to be in that starting role. Obviously, you're gonna have a bad game out of your backup. That's just what happens. Obviously, sometimes they can boom, but how rare is that you get like a Brock Purdy or like Tom Brady, just a backup coming in and outperforming like crazy? You don't see it much, and it's it's something you got to notice that backups aren't in there to start 18 games. They're in there. Obviously, they will always be ready. They will always be ready. If they have to play 18 games, they will always. I think
Teddy Bridgewater wasn't, but
obviously I don't think Teddy Bridgewater knew he was on the Buccaneers. I think he was just there for media. But every backup quarterback needs to be 18 game ready when that season starts. And I think they are. They have the mentality like, if he gets injured, I go out there and outperform. I have the opportunity to become a starter myself, and I have the opportunity to make these bigger paychecks with these other quarterbacks, even if it's not amazing. Yeah,
because if you go in there and you
Justin
step up,
Fields got a pretty big contract.
Look at Malik Willis.
Malik Willis just got a huge contract
because of the fact that he stepped up when he was a backup, and now the Miami Dolphins have taken a shot on him, and they believe that he can be a true starting quarterback.
Yeah, and going to that, in my opinion, I'm not a big believer. I want him to prove me wrong, but I'm not a big believer in him. I think obviously he had great games, but also
it's hard to keep up over a 17-game season. He's gonna, no guy stays healthy.
Yeah, I think obviously he can plug and play in those scenarios, but I just don't think he's ready to get that big of a contract, get that paid that much. And you're giving him a worse scenario than the Packers had. You're giving him a terrible offensive line.
Yeah.
You're giving, obviously they signed Caden Proctor, which was I think they could have got Caleb Downs, and I think he would have been a cornerstone for that defense. But
and they also could have got Reuben Bain. Yeah, but they passed up on both.
And they took Caden Proctor, which the longer we go down the road, the more I start to understand it a little more. Obviously they think Malik Willis is going to be their quarterback. Obviously, I don't know how many year contract they gave him.
I believe it was a 3-year.
3 years. So I think they're looking for the future, and they're trying to get. Obviously, they're going to have a great offensive tackle there, and I think they're trying to build off of Malik Willis and start giving Devon Achane getting out good block outside tackles, letting Devon Achane get outside the tackle, because obviously that's what he's known for, his speed. And I like they're starting to play to their strengths. I do like that, but I don't think they're going to do great. I think what they needed was the best player off the board, knowing where they're at, and I don't think in that scenario he was the pick, but I see what approach they were taking. I do like it.
I agree. Going back to the Buccaneers' depth, looking at running back, it's another position that they upgraded. Rachaad White was a great backup, but you could tell he didn't want to be here towards the end of the season. He was, I don't want to say a cancer in the locker room, but he couldn't have been that great to be around.
Yeah, no.
He didn't want to be there. I think Kenneth Gainwell is, a lot better of a runner. Then I think he's about the same caliber, if not better, at both blocking and receiving.
I think he will be like what they need I think he's what they need in the in that locker room. I think he puts, obviously he wasn't even a starter going into the year. People didn't think he was going to start. They thought he would be an okay backup, and then he goes and he wins team MVP for the Steelers.
Yeah,
that's a player that just he's out there to play the game, and he doesn't care.
Another thing that's so talked about with him is his character. His character. He's a stand-up guy. He's a leader.
And I think he's got humble too. He's a very humble guy.
Yeah.
just based off of that.
And, but Sean Tucker, obviously, he's amazing depth. He has,
Great power back.
about a game every single year where he just goes absolutely crazy. And I think a guy like Bucky Irving needs to have somebody else to backpack off of him. I think with his size, if you want Bucky Irving to even make it through his rookie contract, he's got to, I don't want to say split carries, but I think, he needs to sit about 40%. And I think Kenneth Gainwell is a guy that allows him to do that because he's about as close to a starting caliber running back. I think he would start on a decent amount of teams this year.
Yeah, I do agree.
And then going into the receiver depth, I think the receiver room's already set. I don't even think, maybe the wide receiver 6 spot.
We were intending on losing a receiver the past 2 years, knowing our wide receiver room would still be good.
Yeah.
Which now that you see it, people were clowning on that Aguka draft pick, and now you look back at it. If we didn't draft Aguka that year, what we're looking like right now is Chris Godwin, McMillan, and then Ted Hurst and Tez Johnson, all of that. I think that Aguka pick was absolutely fantastic now that we see it. And we even said that. We said that
it was,
right now
it was a
that
pick
looks
that was
bad.
Yeah.
But once Mike Evans retires, once Chris Godwin maybe leaves, then this draft pick going to look a lot better in the future. And it took a lot less years than we thought, but already I think he's going to be that 1,000-yard receiver the Buccaneers need.
Yeah, and I think he might even be more than a 1,000-yard receiver. I think, a lot of people look at it and you really just look at Josh Gristard, that he didn't really have, he just kind of stopped game planning for Ibuka. How do you have a guy have 700 yards through 8 games and you're just going to stop game planning for him? Doesn't even get to 1,000.
Like Mike Evans comes back and that's what people start saying. I don't think he's good because he's in this stacked wide receiver room, and when they're all healthy, he can't produce. I just don't think that's true. I think offensive coordinator that can.
I think that makes him better.
It's a triple threat. I think
the more guys you have, the more guys they have to cover.
Yeah,
and so
they're like, oh, we got to go double team Mike Evans going deep. They're going to go deep.
So in
us.
what world?
There you go. Igbuka's open.
Yeah, in what world is Igbuka going from the main target of defenses to pay attention to him being the third option of guys to pay attention to? In what world does that make him a worse player?
I don't understand it. You have I think Mike Evans was that deep guy. Igbuka was that medium guy, and then Godwin was that short guy. Godwin's that short guy, that easy, deep
third
balls
down,
covered, deep balls covered,
third and fourth.
Hit Godwin on wherever he's at because he's a reliable catcher. He was. Yeah. We've seen that before in him a lot. Obviously, with the injury, he wasn't able to play as much, but no, it was great. Yeah, and we don't have enough time to get through the rest of these picks, so I do want to actually shift to hockey if you'd like to do that. And give a little shift to hockey because I don't know if we've talked about hockey too much since. It is approaching 12, so we are going to have to shut down. 12:10. My car. Oh, yeah. I'm in 2-hour parking. So we are going to wrap up.
Guys, just want to say, I'm sure you guys already mentioned it, but if you hadn't, the Rowdies did beat Louisville City FC last night, so they still remain undefeated, the best team in the USL. Did you guys talk about that? No, we're talking about the Bucks. That's okay. That's all good. Also want to shout out again, Brett Phillips came on in studio yesterday. You guys were there because you're technicians, but I wanted to apologize for all the Between the Lines fans out here because I told the guys I'd bring lights this morning, and so because we're moving between studios, between here and Shipyard, between here and Sea Dogs, and of course Fergs. So I apologize for no lighting, but fantastic show, and that's all. I just want to mention the fact that the Rowdies are still the best team. Oh, until the World Cup starts in 10 days in America.
I appreciate it, Ray. So that was another episode of Between the Lines on this Sunday, May 31st. Almost said March for a second. This is Between the Lines, a Tampa St. Pete Sports Connection production by Shipyard Brewery, live from Fergs Sports Bar and Grill. Not in the Body Armor Coca-Cola studios, but we are right upstairs from it. Thank you for watching.